Joan is awful. This is an episode of Black Mirror hosted by Netflix. Welcome back to Movie Mistakes, fellow Black Mirror enthusiasts. Today we're deep diving into a recently aired episode, Joan is Awful. This standout episode delivers a captivating story of Joan, a woman whose mundane life gets the Hollywood treatment, quite literally, leading to unexpected and unsettling circumstances. In this episode, we'll be analyzing the decisions that Joan makes and pointing out where she may have stumbled along the way. From the moment she unknowingly signed away her life rights to the streaming platform, to the dramatic fallout of her on-screen persona's action. Joan's story is ripe with moments that make us ponder, what if? Without further delay, let's jump into it, shall we? In this scene, Joan has the task of firing one of her fellow employees. We're at the beginning stages of the episode, but the question that I have is Joan awful for firing one of her friends? It appears to me that they've known each other for a little while, even to the point where the employee has invited Joan over to her newly acquired apartment. We can tell from the scene that her friend is pretty shook up about being fired. But should Joan be labeled the bad guy for doing this? I don't think so, because Joan is just doing her job. So while she's firing her friend, she gets up and tells her that she's going to give her a minute to compose herself. But as the camera switches over to Joan's friend, we can see that the lanyard is kind of out of position. But as her friend tells her that she feels pretty composed, the camera angle switches back and forth, and we can now see that the lanyard has somehow fixed itself. I mean, to go along with the theme of the show, maybe it was CGI that fixed it. So the first time that Joan was actually awful was this scene right here. Earlier in the day, she received a text message from an old boyfriend named Mac. Apparently, Mac is in town and would like to see her. So in true awful fashion, she decides to meet up with him after seeing her therapist for some drinks. But Mac, after a brief conversation, he gets right to the point and tells Joan this.
I want to be with you.
So in this part truly didn't make Joan awful, but the part that alarmed me is when she replied this.
How can I trust you?
That part tells me, although she is in a relationship with a boyfriend, Krish, she is entertaining the thought of taking Mac up on his offer.
Oh God, you broke up.
So if you don't want to be with Krish, which, while watching the full episode, he is a great guy, why torture this guy? Get out of the relationship with Krish and then deal with Mac full time. For this clip, Joan is getting up to leave after Mac makes his proposal. I guess she needs some time to think as she sucks down her martini. But we get a look at Mac and we can see one of his hairs is draping down on his forehead. Actually not that big of a deal, except for when the camera angle zooms in on Mac, we can see that his hair is now intact. So when Joan and her boyfriend Krish come across the Streamberry episode, they are both pretty shocked and amazed that it looks so much like Joan. Joan is not interested at all about watching the show, but her boyfriend is pretty adamant about watching it. So as they watch the show, she notices that everything that Selma Hayek does in the show, who is playing her likeness, she actually did that day. But the problem is, the more that she began to freak out about the show, the more it made him want to watch it. This is where she made her mistake. She should have calmly and rationally asked him, you know what, I don't want to watch this show. Or if he decides to push the issue and watch the show, she could have just said, hey, that's a pretty interesting concept of show. Wow, I'm glad I don't do things like that. Unless she told him about every moment of that day that she went through, there was no way for him to know that she listened to the music that she was listening to. There was no way for him to know that she terminated someone that day. There was no way for him to know that she was going to see her therapist unless he already knows her schedule. And last but not least, there was no way for her boyfriend to know that she went and saw Mac that day. If she just could have remained calm and just deployed plausible deniability, she would have been more than okay. So as the couple continues to watch the episode, we kind of get a medium shot of Joan and notice that she's got several hairs out of place. I mean, makes sense to me that she would because she is absolutely freaking out. But as usual, when the camera angle switches back and forth, we can now see that she has no hairs out of place. I added the first image so that you can reference the two photos side by side. She puts her head down into her phone, and at this point, she doesn't see the fact that Krish sees the text messages back and forth from her to Mac. So her boyfriend, just like any other would, asks her, did her ex-boyfriend text her?
Has Mac been texting you?
What?
So at this point, Joan has had enough and she gets up and tries to turn the television off. Which, again, as a boyfriend, which would start to alarm me and I'd want to see more. So Krish becomes heartbroken when he sees this.
There was so much crazy, wild, imaginative, constant sex.
So I'm a bit confused here. I believe she doesn't want to hurt his feelings, but she really doesn't want to be with him. She really wants to be with Mac. Check this out.
But I never got over him.
So in that clip, she reveals to her therapist that she was never actually over her ex-boyfriend Mac, who we can see here is watching the show as well. So finally, Krish makes his way to his car, and she is trying to stop him from leaving, but he asks her a very critical question.
Show me your phone.
It's in the house.
It's at this point that he was 100% sure that the show was real and that everything that had played out in the show, Joan did that day. But again, I ask, why is she so adamant about getting Krish back when she really just wants to be with Mac?
I never got over him.
And as you probably could have guessed it, not even 24 hours later, she's at Mac's hotel room sleeping with him. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comment section below.